Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock. And if you go to the funastrology.com website, there's an orange box where you can leave us a question just like this.
Hi, Thomas. I hear you speak so much about the bending of the nodes in relation to the nodes of the moon. So my question for you is, if all the planets essentially have a north and south node, why do you think astrologers place so much emphasis on simply the moon's nodes? What's your take on the bending of the nodes when it comes to other planetary nodes? And do you think they hold as much weight as the nodes of the moon? Thank you.
So, Robert, here's another about two-part question that is great. So, first of all, she's talking about when there's a planet at a 90-degree square, or some call it the bending of the nodes of one of the both nodes of the moon at that point, a planet is at some proximity of 90 degrees, the significance of that. And then let's take, after you've addressed that, this conversation of why do we just use the moon's nodes and not Saturn's and Jupiter's and everybody else's, because they have moons too. So we'll get into that as well. What say you?
Well, I would say let's take the questions in reverse order and talk about the planet's nodes first, because going into the bending of the nodes is fairly technical. But if we answer the first question about why do astrologers concentrate on the moon's nodes and often ignore the nodes of the other planets, I think that that's an important question. And the reason that we do is especially the nodes of the outer planets move very, very slowly. They are a great study, a fascinating study when you're looking at astrology and historic events. And it's not that the planet's nodes don't have meaning in a natal horoscope, but like a lot of, let's say several techniques along the way, Thomas, I would learn about them and then start trying to apply them in a chart. So, for example, when Chiron entered the picture back in the 70s, 80s, I, of course, studied it. But I found that I didn't get anything from Chiron that I wasn't already getting from the horoscope. So I thought, why am I putting in this extra work when, in fact, it has never given me anything that I have not already seen elsewhere? The same is true with these planetary nodes. It's not that they don't work. It's that why am I spending time with them when I find, for me, I can only speak for myself, I don't get anything from them that I don't already get as far as an individual's chart. Now, the moon's node, yeah, because the moon is the most personal, fastest moving of the planets, of the glyphs that we use. So it's a highly personal point, and it has to do with your inner roots, if you will, your habits, your unconsciousness, your feeling nature, and so on. So this is a very primitive, really foundational part of the archetypal system in the horoscope. The sun is something that you're supposed to be conscious of. The moon isn't. Now, you can be conscious of the moon through astrology, and that's about the only way I know to do that, this system, because it says, look at what the moon represents here: feelings, emotions, women, security, home, family issues, and on and on. So that's what that archetypal energy is all about. Look at the sign that you have it in. Here's what the moon in that sign means, and there are a whole bunch of meanings. But now suddenly you've made it conscious in a way that you couldn't have without astrology. So the moon does have to do with both karma in that sense, but also these habits. So the moon's nodes then become very personally important in terms of past life and karma. For example, the north node is, I take it to mean whatever sign the node is in, you have developed those qualities in a past life or past lives, and you were meant to build on them and rely on them and learn them if you have to in this life. The south node, by conflict with the moon, I'm talking, the south node sign shows you traits in a past life that you've either misused or ignored or abused, that you are therefore weak on in this life, and that you need to pay conscious attention to. Otherwise, those negative traits will cause trouble for you and frustrate you. So those are a very simplistic way of looking at those nodes. And then if you go into cosmobiology, for example, Reinhold Ebertin calls the nodes associations, meaning with groups or individuals. So someone whose sun conjuncts your north node at birth can turn out to be advantageous for you, or someone whose Jupiter conjuncts your north node. Whereas someone whose sun conjuncts your south node is going to challenge you on those south node areas where you may be weak at and need to learn from. And that can become a very conscious exercise. When you then begin to get into the nodes of the planets, you're adding another 9 factors, or how many ever you study, to an already crowded mandala or horoscope. And just ask you, try it, and see if you get enough value out of doing it to use it in every reading. I did not. The same with Chiron. I just simply did not get anything from it that I didn't get already.
What do you replace Chiron with? You said that you didn't add anything. So where do you go instead of?
Well, it's the wounded healer. And already we have all the archetypes we need, to my way of thinking. Now, this is just me. In the 6th house, the 6th house tells me everything I need to know about a person's psychological and therefore physiological self-integration. The 6th house, the sign on it, the planets in that house. That's how this person puts themselves together psychologically, or doesn't, and how they fall apart psychologically if it's negative. So I may be a Libra, and I am a Libra, but my 6th house is Gemini, and I have Uranus in Gemini, and that's how I think about my entire life and everything in it. I have Uranus there in Gemini retrograde. I've never felt like, it's not that I don't feel like I belong. I feel like I belong pretty much anywhere. I always have. I'm very comfortable in any kind of environment, any situation, but I've always felt apart from everybody and everything because of that Uranus there. Uranus in Gemini is very independent. It stands outside and looks in at not only the group, but at itself. And I'm very objective about myself. I'm not schizophrenic. I don't have a split personality. I'm not dissociated with myself, but I can look at myself and my life very objectively. So that 6th house then becomes the health aspect already. It simultaneously says how you can get well through 6th house indicate, or how you get sick and why. So already there's the wounded healer. And then you look at the 12th house, secret sorrow, self-undoing. Just take the sign on the 12th house. That will be a sign and an archetype and any planets in that house that you need to get consciously aware of in order to heal yourself, because they will be wounded. So if you have Sagittarius on that 12th house cusp, you look at all the Sagittarian traits you need to be very aware of. Your own opinionatedness, your own restlessness, your own difficulty in staying focused on any one thing for a long, long time, for example. Your tendency to want to get into arguments as opposed to settle them. You want to start them, and so on. So you can see that wounded healer archetype of Chiron through the 12th, through the 6th. You can see it through Mercury, which is the natural ruler of the 6th house, Virgo on that cusp of the natural wheel. So you're seeing the wounded healer in several different ways already, to me, in the horoscope. And simply sticking in Chiron and beginning to take the time to analyze it has never given me anything that I've found valuable. Because I'm not that it's invaluable, it works, but it's just another factor that I've never found any reason to use, because I never got that much out of it that I didn't get already. That's the only reason.
Well, and then
same with fixed stars.
Yeah,
Thomas.
I was going to say fixed stars, the other asteroids. You could get a chart that looks like a street map of Lower Manhattan.
And, to me, again, these things are all, especially, for example, the planetary nodes. If you're studying history, you can make some incredible correlations there. But how do those planetary nodes help me decide whether or not to lease or buy this car? They don't. How do the planetary nodes help me to decide whether I'm going to marry this person or not? They don't. The planets that we already have do. The planets as they stand in the horoscope do. But those things don't add anything that helps me live my life.
So there's almost a beauty in the simplicity.
Well, there you go. Occam's razor. Keep it simple, stupid. And I do find sometimes, Thomas, that especially I think when we're starting out in astrology, it's so fascinating. We just want to learn everything that we can and try everything we can. And I think part of the expectation, if I just learn this new technique, then I'll be even better and I'll be able to predict everything that's going to happen to me or anybody else. And that's just not true. But that's the hope there, when in fact you have to, I think, on your own, like I did, explore each of these techniques that you're interested. Try them on many charts, multiple charts. See what you get from them. I don't use progressions for the same thing. I do use solar arcs because I got a lot more from solar arcs. I still do that actually work and that are practical. With progressions, I just never did.
Now, let me just checkpoint here that if those other areas, the whole plethora, the whole basket that we've just discussed, if any of them gave you an extra edge, would you be incorporating them?
Absolutely.
So it's not a bias against.
Oh, no. You have to try them to know.
It's just
because I'm sure there's some astrologers out there, Thomas, who would look at Chiron and get a ton of very valuable information. They wouldn't stop using it for the world. Same with planetary nodes. I'm sure there are people out there that maybe can find a really wonderful use for them in natal readings. I just never did. So I'm not saying they're bad and don't try them. I think the only way you can learn anything really in astrology and learn what works for you is to try it. If you don't get results with it, put it aside for a while. You may want to come back to it and try it again, or you may just say, I'm getting enough as it is.
I'll tell you the tact I took is that the basket in front of me, because I'm so much younger in my astrology journey. So you obviously have mastered and dabbled and explored all of these things.
I'm glad you think so. I don't know that any of us think we've mastered it, but thank you.
Well, but at least in comparison. And so I figured until I mastered what was there in front of me, which were the basics, that guys like you and Steve Forrest and these others are broadly accept as the things to have on the chart, I've got a long ways to go, obviously, before I could say, well, okay, let's maybe add something else. I need to master what's right there. So that's one of the reasons I haven't. Hey, let's circle back to the first part, and that is when planets are at the bending, the 90-degree aspect to the nodes. I just put up my chart, which I'll put in the show notes, which is a pretty direct hit. I mean, I've got it 1 degree away. Saturn in Capricorn in the 7th house, which is ruled by Sagittarius, is at a direct 1 degree square to the nodes, which are in South Node Aries, North Node Libra.
All right, and so those are your moon's nodes. So that Saturn square represents your connection with the collective Libra, for example, archetype, and the collective Aries archetype in life. And it should become a part of your career, and you should be a counselor and a teacher and an advisor of some kind because you have Saturn in the 7th. It's one of the highest things you can do with Saturn in the 7th, is to be a counselor and teacher, an advisor, a consultant. And it squares your nodes, so you have to do this in a public way through especially the Libran archetype, which is from a past life, something that you have developed. So you have Libra of the arts, for example, broadcasting being one, but through bringing an air sign balance and harmony, hopefully, into the collective through your work, Saturn. And then squaring the South Node in Aries, you're also, this is what I have. Well, I have the South Node in Capricorn and the North Node in Cancer, but you have the South Node in Aries. So one of the things you're trying to heal, both in yourself, which you've done, but in other people through what you are teaching and disseminating, is the idea of self-development, this Aries quality about know thyself, be true to thyself. And you've lived this out because you've got the North Node in Libra, the sign of marriage, which you've tried and worked, and you had children. And this other side of you, which is the self-directed kind of life, which is alone, basically, because it takes place inside you. And that's the South Node in Aries. So you were raised not to do that. You were raised to conform to the expectations that everybody has for you, to get married, to have children, to have a conventional life, to raise them, to go to church, and do all of those things. Meanwhile, there's this side of you, that South Node in Aries, which would naturally seem, if I do all those things, I'm sacrificing my own dreams. You have Mercury and Jupiter and Sag in your 6th house, and that's how you put yourself together. You are an eternal optimist, teacher, philosopher, communicator, Mercury and Jupiter and Sag of the 9th house sign and so on, worldwide communications, all of that. So, in fact, your Mercury and Jupiter at birth is pretty healthy because you have it's also a mutable sign and it squares Pluto at birth. So you have to break with the traditional philosophy, religion, and so on, the Pluto and Virgo, to be who you truly are and what you truly are, which you've done, by this point. Does this make sense too, or not?
Of course it does. It does.
But do you see how it works with the nodes?
Yes, definitely. And I hope that answers our listener's question. That was awesome. We really appreciated it. Robert and I kind of lit up when we saw that because it had so many different angles that we could go down. If you would like to talk to Robert about your nodal path, wow, what a great, you could do a reading just on that and you could see the wisdom that you would get for yourself. All of the information is in the show notes, along with all the other goodies, our Discord channel link, our YouTube channel, and what else have we got in there? Oh, well, the charts that were mentioned today, both Robert's and mine. You can get those there, too. All right, thank you so much for listening to this one. We will see you again next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. And now you know why we call him the GOAT, Robert Glasscock.